giving you a voice,
making it loud our own way.
Welcome to the fun.
Let's move on to our second topic, the Rover Ruckus game. So does anyone have any general thoughts of this year's game? Is it easy or difficult? Are there any strategies you guys are looking at pursuing?
I think
Okay. So I think my answer to that is yes and yes for is it easy or difficult. It's obviously not a game like Rescue. That was, one of the more challenging games FTC has seen. And you look at it, it's obviously not a game necessarily quite at that level of challenging. But especially for rookie teams, I think it's going to be a big challenge because there's a lot that has to initially be overcome in order to score any points. So, even if teams are scoring in the low goal in the depot, teams still have to get into that crate or pick up minerals, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think for rookie teams, it's probably more challenging than most games. But for veteran teams, as teams are getting more experienced, it's probably about on par with other games, is what I think based on the rules and then what my team has experienced as well so far this season.
I agree with you. All of the game elements are things we've seen before, and there's no really new challenges. We've done hanging before, and we've done all terrain. So I think this should be pretty easy for any non-rookie teams or veteran teams. I think the challenge is just going to be trying to get as many pieces of debris into the bucket at a time. I think autonomous will probably not be as much of the challenge. The place you can probably max out will be teleop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I think this year may be easier to do all of the tasks basically than some previous years, but to be the best is always hard. I mean, it's not like it's easy to be the fastest robot. You're never going to get there. So I think there's definitely going to be challenges. It's really going to come down to the speed and teleop and the cycle times.
Yeah, I agree. I think that after a certain amount of rookie teams who are, reasonably focusing on one or two tasks to do in the game rather than all of them, I think that a lot of teams will be able to do all of the tasks. But I think that there's going to be that separation between being a team that can do all the tasks and then being a team that can do all the tasks really well and then be, very competitive throughout the season. Definitely. Do you guys think the game will change in any ways by the time we get to Worlds? Because last year things were being picked up off the field and it was totally clean. I didn't see that in regional competitions back in Minnesota.
I think we'll see kind of a similar evolution of this game that we've seen from a lot of others. I think we'll be running out of minerals by the end of matches at Worlds, maybe some state championships as well, especially in the finals. I think we'll see some incredible last-minute hangs, probably some beautiful coordinated autonomous programs as the season progresses, but I don't think there will be any absolutely overwhelming changes to the actual game. I think it will be a matter of speed and reliability and just the little things that make the game change.
Yeah, I kind of liked that this year that they made teams interact more during autonomous so that their paths had to cross over, because last year it was pretty separated. You didn't really see any of the other robots on the field and there wasn't any defense allowed. So this is actually going to be kind of interesting this year.
I really enjoyed one season of having just a solo, you have your own little corner for autonomous. I think that was really fun to have once, but I agree that it would get old if it was happening year after year after year. So I'm glad it happened, but now I'm glad we're back to the other style.
Yeah. I think something that's going to be interesting that we'll probably see later on is more coordination with partners and things like that, because the lander is actually pretty small. So if you and your partner both have relatively fast robots that are going back and forth a lot, there's definitely be some interesting coordination there. And then also, like we were talking about, autonomous coordination is going to be definitely interesting to see how teams manage that, especially going later on when all teams have autonomouses.
Yeah, okay. I definitely... Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Yeah, as Rachel was saying, I definitely think that's going to be the most difficult part. Once all the teams get to a certain level, that they're all going really quickly to the lander, how to make sure that you're not blocking your alliance partner so everyone can be as efficient as possible. Nice. What is everyone's strategy for these first couple regionals or league events? What is the mission that you're going to pursue first?
I mean, what our team is working on first is mostly working on the latching and just lots of autonomous, getting kind of a framework set up for our code so that later on, as our robot changes, it's easily adaptable and scalable in that kind of way, because we thought that the lift type thing and the autonomous are things that are a little more flexible. And then we've been thinking about mineral as well, kind of keeping that in the back of our mind. But those are the two things that we've been mostly focusing on so far.
Sounds like a good plan. Our team is focusing on like deploying and hanging again, because we know that's a big chunk of the points that are pretty easy to achieve. All right, it looks like we have a couple questions from the chat that we should address. So from Farah_Toa, what are your thoughts on the new scoring system, including live scoring?
I think, go ahead.
Okay. I think definitely it's nice in that it's a little bit nicer for the audience, which I think is important in getting, because kind of right now FRC seems like it's the more audience friendly first program right now. I think the idea is good. I mean, I think because it is not too hard to count the silver and gold afterwards, it would be nice in close matches if they could do recounts and things like that. But I don't know.
Definitely. Madeline, do you have a perspective on this?
I'm sort of worried. As I'm usually always worried about the scoring things, that something's going to go wrong, and I know that it was already a big change when we ended like the separation between autonomous and teleop, and that was something to get used to. But I mean, I'm sure it won't be a problem later on, but I think at the first few meets, making sure that you have someone who's like checking to see like this is what we got, so you can make sure that you're not accidentally getting an extra point or conversely getting like less points than you actually got.
Yeah, and to my knowledge, I'm pretty sure that the live scoring won't be final, so the refs will still count it up afterwards, but there'll probably still be some confusion at the end of matches between the audience members and the teammates too, so it'll be nice to like get everyone in the flow of that as well.
I do think that especially as it gets tuned though, and as everything's really falling into place well, it will add a lot, especially like I think what Rachel was saying for the audience perspective, because in some matches, it can be really challenging to look at a field and tell which alliance is winning. Last year it was relatively doable, but in some games it can be a real challenge to actually see what's happening in the heat of the moment. And so I think it will add a lot for audiences. So I think it's a good change, even if it might take a little bit to get there.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Okay, are there any sensors or techniques that we think will make gameplay more interesting this year? I know Rachel in the past had used motion profiling in order to make their autonomous work more smoothly. Rachel, could you explain that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I had a lot of fun doing research and learning how to implement motion profiling. I mean, the basic explanation, I guess, of that is you're controlling your velocity and your acceleration and sometimes jerk and things like that. So you have a much more smooth path from going from point A to point B, which has been super useful in the past for our team, of like just making sure autonomous is a lot more consistent, so you can like input a distance and actually go there. And using a combination of like having a trajectory already planned and then also using feedback from sensors can be super powerful. And we're really excited to do that, more of that this year, because I think especially, I mean, at any level of tournament, you can, for higher level teams, you could be traveling all over the field. And earlier tournaments, that might mean like if you're sampling, double sampling, or later on, if you're kind of like moving and coordinating with your partners, those could get to be some long paths. So having sensors and feedbacks and algorithms that will make it more consistent are going to be super important for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree. Go ahead. All right.
All right. Go.
Okay. So I think that the motion profiling will definitely be something that will help a lot of teams. I think that idea is something that's going to be really necessary, especially as teams get to the higher levels. There are also other ways that teams are going to be doing it. So whether it's navigating with OpenCV or Vuforia using the targets on the field. So I think basically your end game that you're talking about is definitely something that's going to be vital for teams. And there are a few different ways that we'll probably see that happening throughout the season.
Yeah. Do we think that the targets are going to be very useful this season? Because when I originally
Probably
saw
to a
the
few
video,
teams.
I didn't think that they were going to be as useful as they were last year in Relic Recovery.
Yeah, there have always been a couple of teams who make really good use of them. I think for the most part, most teams probably just won't feel the need to use them, but I'm sure there will be some absolutely gorgeous programs that we see using them. So I'm excited about those.
Does anyone have any opinions on launching versus carrying the minerals all the way up to the lander? We know that you can't launch from the crater anymore or score from the crater. But do we think shooting will still be a viable option?
Not really. I think we'll see some teams that do it and pull it off pretty well. But my expectation is that for the most part, there will be teams that can just score via a lift or some other physically raising the minerals mechanism just as well. And that allows you a lot more control over what's actually happening with the minerals. So if you get bumped or something's going a little off, there's much more ability to correct. So I think at least most of the high-level bots that we see won't be launching.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think some teams will try it because it's cool. But really, it isn't that far from the crater to the lander. So I'm not sure how much of an advantage it would really give. And if you're kind of losing some consistency from that, it may not be worth it.
Yeah, I think it's probably just simpler and most likely more effective to just dump instead of trying to shoot them, especially because at some point at the higher levels, you're going to run out of one of the minerals, and especially in shooters, it's hard to have it work for both the balls and the cubes, considering that they're of different sizes.
I agree with that. We have kind of an off-topic question from the chat, but we will address it anyways. The question's from Fun FTC Nathan. He says, do you plan on going into the STEM fields in the future? And I'll start that off. Yes, I do. I want to be a mechanical engineer and eventually start my own technology company. So I definitely plan staying within the STEM field.
That's awesome. I'm planning to, in college, double major in computer science and mechanical engineering. And then long-term, my dream job is to program for some space company. I really love autonomous control systems. So anything autonomously controlling rockets is the dream to me.
You must be really loving this theme this year then.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty similar to Katie. I really like programming, and I also really, really love design and CAD and things like that. So I'm not sure if in the end I'll go into a more computer science or mechanical engineering career, but definitely in STEM, and I'm really excited.
Yeah. I'm sort of like Rachel, I'm not sure, but recently I've been sort of inspired by the engineers who are making sort of bionic arms and such. And so I'm kind of considering going into biomedical engineering because I love all the new technology that they're coming up with and the way that you can sort of mesh together medicine and tech, and just it's pretty cool in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's awesome. Okay, so we have a couple more questions from the chat. There's one from ye_the_dark, and he said, Mechanum or Mechanum?
I plead the fifth.
I actually use Mechanum. I hadn't heard Mechanum since until I went to North Super Regionals, but that's kind of just the way I learned to say it.
Yeah, I say Mechanum too.
Maybe it's a Minnesota thing. Yes. Put out a poll. Madeline, what do you say?
I am actually Team Mechanum, and now I feel I'm intrigued because I've never heard anyone say it as Mechanum, but maybe it's just the area that I'm in.
Most people I've met say Mechanum, and I think it's technically right. I think that's the first pronunciation listed, but also I say Mechanum, so.
All right. Another question from Ilan. He says, is it worth to be able to score gold and silver minerals at the same time?
Eventually, yes. I don't know that it'll be necessary for early qualifiers, although it's obviously not going to hurt. But I think in the World Championship finals, we will see robots that are capable of scoring both, because otherwise you're just going to be spending more time in the crater eventually as you're running out of minerals. So it's not going to hurt you if it's possible.
Yes, I agree with that. I definitely think people will probably like gravitate towards one element more than the other at the start. Probably the one that's like closest to them too. That makes the most sense. What do you think, Rachel?
I really don't know. I mean, I think it's definitely possible, but I think robots that can, if they can really quickly do two at the same time, then that's going to be a lot more efficient, because then you can kind of have like one alliance partner on gold and one on silver and hopefully stay out of their way a little bit more. But it's also possible that the time it takes to make sure you're only getting two of the same won't even be worth it. So I really don't know.
Yeah. Do we think it's going to be like necessary to sort at one point if we're grabbing both gold and silver?
I think that sorting definitely makes things faster, and at least my team has been doing some sorting prototypes, and I think there are some ways that you can do it that won't really affect like the efficiency. And I know cycle time is going to be a big thing, like how many cycles can you get into one match. And so you worry, like, if we can't sort the minerals and we get one of each kind, is it worth it to go and maneuver ourselves so we can get into both sections of the lander, or do we just try to fit the wrong one out and just, waste time doing that instead?
Yeah, I think some form of sorting will definitely be necessary. It's just a team-by-team basis of whether that's sorting so you can have one gold and one silver and score them each respectively, or whether spitting out the wrong one if you pick up one of each and only want to be carrying gold, for example. But I think no matter what, sorting is definitely going to be necessary, especially as teams are moving on to the higher levels, because it's just not realistic for most teams for the driver to accurately pick up two of the same every single time, especially within the crater.
All right, so we have a question here from David Recharged, and it says, in what ways and how often has block starving affected Schrodinger's hat in rescue? I guess that one's more directed at you.
So yeah, in rescue, my team only scored the blocks. We talked about scoring both, but in the end, we decided that just focusing on blocks made sense, especially with our intake and just how things on the robot were working. We regretted that by the end of the season. I was really wishing that we had scored both, especially because sorting wasn't even necessary for rescue, because they both went into the same goal. So yeah, as we were getting into the division finals and the championship finals at Worlds, I was definitely feeling the lack of blocks on the field, and it was a pain while I was driving.
It's a good question. Okay, we have another one here from the chat, and it's Afera_Toa. And he or she asked, do you plan on continuing to volunteer or mentor for FIRST after you graduate?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Wherever I go, I want to either like find a team to mentor or like go to all of their local competitions, or like even like start a program there. So that's definitely one thing I'm looking for when I'm like going to look at colleges.
Yeah, I can't imagine not volunteering or mentoring with FIRST after this. Like,
yeah.
Keep doing it. I really love it.
Yeah, definitely. FIRST has done so much for me over the years that I've been doing it, that it would feel wrong not to really pay it forward and come back as a volunteer or a mentor or even a coach in the future.
And I would echo that.
All right, we have one last question in the chat before we will move on to our third topic. What does everyone think of the Orange Alliance?
I love it. It's a great resource. I have used it so many times. It's a really, really good tool.
Yes, I agree.
Yes, I agree with you.
Thank you to all of our co-executive producers, keeping fun loud, live, and independent. Pledge your support at patreon.com/FIRST updates now.